again. Please let me stay. Your mother is dead. Leave my house. I have fed you enough. Nem, I'm alone. I'm hungry. I'm scared. But I'm still standing.
Zuri made a decision. She would survive. She would rise.
They called her the orphan girl. They fed her scraps from the table while her cousins feasted. They made her sleep on the floor while they slept in soft beds. They dressed her in rags while they wore silk. But none of them ever asked why a girl, so graceful, so beautiful despite her poverty, never cried. Never complained. Never broke. Zuri kept her grief buried deep because it was the only thing her mother left her, a promise whispered on her deathbed, "Stay strong, Noirem. Your suffering will not last forever. Those who oppress you will one day regret they didn't see your worth." For 12 years, Zuri endured everything her aunt threw at her. The insults. The beatings. The cruelty. She scrubbed floors until her hands bled. She cooked food she wasn't allowed to eat. She raised her aunt's children while being treated worse than a dog. All because her aunt made a promise to Zuri's dying mother, a promise she broke the moment the burial was over. And then, on the day Zuri turned 22, her aunt looked at her and saw something that terrified her. A woman more beautiful, more dignified, more powerful than her own daughters would ever be. So she did what jealous people always do. She threw Zuri into the streets with nothing. No money. No shelter. No mercy. You've eaten my food long enough, her aunt spat. Your mother is dead. I owe you nothing. Standing in the rain with nowhere to go, Zuri made a decision. She would survive. She would rise. And one day, her aunt would see what she had thrown away. Because the girl you destroy today might become the woman whose success exposes your cruelty tomorrow. And when that day came, Zuri wouldn't need to say a word. Her life would speak for itself. The lesson was coming. And some lessons are taught not through confrontation, but through watching someone you tried to break become everything you feared they would be. The rain hammered against Zuri's thin wrapper as the compound gate slammed shut behind her. The sound echoed like a final judgment. Through the metal bars, she could see her aunt's silhouette in the doorway, arms crossed, face hard as stone. No regret, no mercy. Just cold satisfaction at finally ridding herself of the burden she'd resented for 12 years. Zuri's bare feet sank into the muddy road. She had nothing. The small bundle her aunt had thrown at her contained one torn dress and the faded photograph of her mother, the only possession she'd been allowed to keep all these years. Everything else, the childhood, the dignity, the family, had been stripped away piece by piece until this moment. But to understand how Zuri reached this moment, you must know how it all began, the day her mother died. 10-year-old Zuri held her mother's hand, feeling how light it had become. Just months ago, those hands had been strong, braiding Zuri's hair every morning, cooking her favorite meals, holding her close when nightmares came. Now they felt like dried leaves, barely there. "Ninem," Zuri whispered, tears streaming down her round cheeks. "Don't leave me." Her mother, Amora, smiled weakly. The illness had ravaged her body, but her eyes still held that fierce love that had been Zuri's whole world. "Noirem, listen carefully. Life will be hard without me. But you are strong. You have my spirit, my grandmother's grace. No matter what happens, hold your head high." Beside the bed stood Ngozi, Amora's younger sister. She dabbed at her eyes with a white handkerchief, her face arranged in perfect grief. "Sister, don't talk like this. You'll recover. Chinik will heal you." But everyone in the small room knew the truth. The traditional healer had shaken his head. The herbs had stopped working. Amora was leaving, and her 10-year-old daughter would be left behind. "Ngozi." Amora's voice grew urgent, her grip tightening on her sister's hand. Promise me you'll care for Zuri as your own. She has no one else. Her father died before she was born. You're all she has." Ngozi knelt beside the bed, tears flowing freely. "I promise, sister. I swear on our mother's grave. Zuri will be my daughter. She'll want for nothing. I'll treat her exactly as I treat Kyoma, Adiz, and Chidi." Amora's face relaxed. "Thank you, Nwanem. Now I can rest." She turned to Z one last time. Stay strong, my daughter. Your suffering will not last forever. Those who oppress you will one day regret they didn't see your worth. Her voice faded to a whisper. Remember who you are. 3 hours later, Amora took her final breath. The compound erupted in wailing. Women poured in from neighboring homes, their cries piercing the night. Zuri sat frozen beside her mother's body, too shocked for tears. The funeral came 7 days later. The entire village gathered. They sang mourning songs, poured libations, honored Amora's memory. Ngozi played the devastated sister perfectly, sobbing dramatically, declaring loudly how she would honor her promise. Zuri is my daughter now, she announced to the gathered mourners. She'll never feel like an orphan in my house. The villagers nodded approvingly. Such a good sister. Such a kind woman. But as the last mourner left and the compound grew quiet, Ngozi looked at 10-year-old Zuri with different eyes. The performance was over. Tomorrow, you start earning your keep, she said coldly. I hope you know how to work. The change happened so gradually that Zuri barely noticed at first. The first week, Ngozi was still kind, in public. But behind closed doors, small cruelties began. Zuri, wash these plates. Not please. Not could you help. Commands. Your mat goes there, in the corridor. Not in the room with Kyoma and Adiz. In the narrow passageway where people walked past all night. You'll eat after everyone finishes. Not with the family. After. If there was anything left. Within a month, the transformation was complete. Kyoma, Adiz, and Chidi attended the village school, their uniforms crisp and clean. Zuri stayed home, scrubbing, cooking, washing, cleaning from dawn until long after dark. They slept on soft mattresses with thick blankets. Zuri slept on a thin mat on the kitchen floor, covering herself with a wrapper so threadbare she could see through it. They ate full plates of jollof rice, fried chicken, chin-chin, fresh fruit. Zuri ate whatever remained, often just gari with palm oil, sometimes only the bones they'd sucked clean. They wore beautiful clothes, Kyoma in her silk wrappers, Adiz in her latest fashion, Chidi in pressed shirts and trousers. Zuri wore the same 2 faded dresses, torn and patched so many times they barely held together. Zuri, the floors aren't clean enough. Ngozi's voice cut through the morning. Do them again. Yes, auntie, Zuri whispered, getting back on her knees. Her hands were already raw from the harsh soap and rough scrubbing. Kyoma walked past, stepping deliberately on the section Zuri had just cleaned. Yeah, you missed a spot. She laughed, her sisters joining in. In the compound, Ngozi's children played, studied, lived. Zuri worked. Always working. Washing their clothes by hand in the metal basin. Fetching water from the well, the heavy bucket cutting into her small shoulders. Cooking elaborate meals she wasn't allowed to taste. Sweeping, mopping, scrubbing, serving. Orphan girl. Bring my shoes. Adiz would call. Faster, or you'll sleep outside tonight. Chidi would threaten. And through it all, Ngozi watched with satisfaction. This was how it should be. Zuri was just an orphan after all. She should be grateful for the roof over her head, the scraps of food, the torn clothes. Grateful. But Zuri remembered her mother's words. She endured. She survived. Because somewhere deep inside, she believed the promise. Your suffering will not last forever. The first time Ngozi felt real fear was at the village market. Zuri was 14 now, and despite 4 years of malnutrition, overwork, and sleeping on hard floors, something about her made people stop and stare. Whose child is that? A market woman whispered. That's Amora's daughter. The one living with her aunt. Amora's child. The woman's eyes widened. Even in rags, look at that face. That grace. Just like her mother. Ngozi heard every word. Her jaw tightened. She looked at Zuri, really looked, and saw what she'd been trying to suppress. Despite the torn dress and dusty feet, despite the exhaustion in her young frame, Zuri had something her own daughters would never have. An inner light. A natural elegance. A beauty that poverty couldn't hide. 16-year-old Kyoma, standing beside her mother in expensive lace, noticed the stares too. "Mama, why are they looking at her?" "Don't mind them," Ngozi snapped. But the seed of jealousy had been planted, and it grew like a poisonous vine. From that day, the cruelty intensified. If Zuri had been worked hard before, now she was worked to the bone. If she'd been fed little before, now she barely ate at all. If she'd been insulted before, now the words cut deeper. "Don't let that girl rest." Ngozi hissed to her daughters. "Keep her busy. Keep her tired. Keep her looking like what she is, nothing." But Zuri was 17 now, and her body betrayed Ngozi's intentions. She grew taller, more graceful. Her eyes held depth beyond her years. Suffering had given her wisdom. Young men in the village began to notice. "Hey, that's the orphan girl. Kui. Despite everything, see how beautiful. If she dressed properly, she would outshine any girl here." These whispers reached Ngozi like daggers. Her own daughters, pampered and pretty, seemed suddenly plain next to Zuri's natural radiance. Kyoma was 20 now and still unmarried. Men found her spoiled and shallow. Adiz was 18 and had suitors, but none serious. They saw her cruelty. "It's that orphan." Kyoma hissed one night. "Men look at her instead of us. Mama, do something." Ngozi's response was to increase Zuri's work even more. Up at 4 in the morning. Asleep past midnight. No rest. No mercy. She had to break that spirit, dim that light, crush whatever made Zuri shine. She sent Zuri to fetch water in the worst heat. Made her cook over hot fires for hours. Had her scrub the same floors repeatedly. Slapped her for imagined infractions. Anything to wear her down. But somehow, impossibly, Zuri endured. She did every task with quiet dignity. She never complained. She never fought back. She just survived, one day at a time, holding on to her mother's promise like a lifeline in a storm. And that unbreakable spirit terrified Ngozi more than anything else. 12 years passed like a slow death. Birthdays came and went. Zuri's never acknowledged, never celebrated. She turned 11, 12, 13 in silence. While Kyoma's 18th birthday brought dancing, food, and gifts, Zuri's 18th passed like any other day. Work, insults, scraps, sleep on the floor. Christmas mornings, the family wore new clothes and attended church like royalty. Zuri wore her same rags and stayed home to prepare their feast. Food she wouldn't eat. Easter celebrations, village festivals, naming ceremonies, the family attended in glory. Zuri remained behind, cleaning their compound, washing their celebration clothes, invisible and forgotten. There were moments of particular cruelty she never forgot. At 15, she'd found a small wildflower growing near the compound wall. She'd picked it, held it close, remembering how her mother loved flowers. Kyoma had seen, snatched it away, crushed it under her heel. Orphans don't deserve beautiful things. At 18, a kind neighbor had given Zuri a small bar of soap. Real soap, not the harsh washing soap that destroyed her hands. Ngozi had found it, accused her of stealing, and beaten her until she couldn't stand. At 20, a young man at the market had smiled at her, a genuine smile of admiration. Ngozi had seen, dragged Zuri home, and cut off the little hair she'd managed to grow. "You think you're beautiful? You think men should look at you? You're nothing. Remember that." The physical pain was terrible. The hunger was constant. But the loneliness was worst of all. She had no one. The village women saw her suffering but didn't interfere. It wasn't their place. Other children avoided her. Associating with the orphan girl might bring bad luck. Even the family's servants pitied her but couldn't help. They needed their jobs. She was utterly, completely alone. Every night on her thin mat, she closed her eyes and talked to her mother's spirit. "Ninem, I'm trying to be strong. But I'm so tired. So hungry. So alone. When will it end? When will your promise come true?" Sometimes, in dreams, she felt her mother's presence. Felt warm arms around her. Heard that beloved voice. "Hold on, Noirem. The dawn always comes after the darkest night. Hold on." So she did. She held on when Chidi poured dirty water on her sleeping mat as a joke. She held on when Adiz shredded the photograph of her mother, her only treasure, then laughed at her silent tears. She held on when Ngozi made her sleep outside during a storm because she'd been too slow with dinner. She held on through 12 years of systematic cruelty designed to break her spirit. And somehow, impossibly, her spirit refused to break. Battered, bent, scarred, but not broken. Because deep inside, she still believed. Suffering wouldn't last forever. The dawn would come. She was 22 now. And she had no idea that everything was about to change. Ngozi woke that morning with a familiar dread in her stomach. It was Zuri's 22nd birthday, not that anyone would acknowledge it. But Ngozi had been watching, and what she saw terrified her. Despite 12 years of abuse, despite malnutrition and exhaustion, despite rags and sleeping on floors, Zuri had become breathtaking. At 22, even poverty couldn't hide what she was, a woman of devastating beauty and unshakable dignity. Kyoma was 26 now, desperate, still unmarried. Men found her entitled and cold. Adiz was 24, engaged, but her fiancé was having second thoughts. He'd seen her cruelty to servants. Chidi was 22, useless, failed out of school, no prospects. And then there was Zuri. Still in rags, still sleeping on floors, still eating scraps. But when she walked through the market, conversations stopped. When she fetched water from the well, young men found excuses to be there. When she stood in the compound at dawn, sunlight caught her face and made her look like something from an old story. She has to go, Ngozi whispered to herself. Before someone sees past the rags. Before someone offers marriage. Before my daughters are completely shamed. That afternoon, she called Zii into the parlor. The girl came immediately, head slightly bowed. 12 years had taught her to expect nothing good from these summons. You're 22 now, Ngozi said, her voice flat and cold. Yes, auntie. You've lived in my house for 12 years. Eaten my food. Slept under my roof. Zuri said nothing. Both of them knew she'd been given scraps and slept on floors, but arguing was pointless. I've done my duty to your mother, Ngozi continued. More than my duty. You're an adult now. It's time you fend for yourself. Zuri's head snapped up. Auntie, please. Pack whatever belongs to you. You leave tonight. But auntie, my mother, your sister, she made you promise. Your mother is dead. Ngozi's voice cracked like a whip. I owe you nothing. You've eaten my food long enough. You've been a burden on this family for 12 years. I've fed you, housed you, clothed you. Clothed me. Zuri's voice, usually so soft, held a note of steel. These rags. Fed me. The scraps after everyone finished. Housed me. The kitchen floor. Ngozi's hand shot out, slapping Zuri across the face. How dare you? Ungrateful wretch. Get out. Get out of my house. Kyoma, Adiz, and Chidi appeared in the doorway, enjoying the show. Yes, Mama. Kyoma cheered. We've supported her long enough. Goodbye, orphan girl. Adiz sang out. Zuri stood there, hand on her burning cheek, looking at the only family she had left. Seeing no mercy. Nodded it. Just cold satisfaction at finally being rid of her. Go, Ngozi said quietly, deadly. Now. 20 minutes later, Zuri stood at the compound gate with a small cloth bundle containing one torn dress and nothing else. The photograph of her mother, destroyed by Adiz years ago. No money. Noschus. No food. Nothing. The gate slammed shut behind her. The rain began to fall. And standing there in the darkness, Zuri made a decision. She would survive. She would rise. And one day, they would see what they had thrown away. The first 3 days were the worst. Zuri had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. She slept under the market stalls at night, curling herself into the smallest possible space, trying to disappear. The rats didn't scare her. 12 years with Ngozi had taught her that human cruelty was far worse than anything nature could offer. She woke before dawn, before market women arrived, and slipped away to the stream to wash her face. She was homeless, but she wouldn't be dirty. She had nothing, but she still had her dignity. Hunger gnawed at her constantly. She drank water from the stream to fill her stomach. Sometimes market women, seeing her thin frame and haunted eyes, would slip her a piece of yam or cassava. She thanked them with grace that surprised them. "That's Amora's daughter," one woman whispered to another. "Living on the streets now. Her aunt threw her out." "Ah! After raising her for 12 years. Raised her as a maid, you mean? We all saw it. That woman's cruelty was legendary." The whispers spread. The village began to know the full story. Not from Zuri, she never complained, never spoke ill of her aunt, but from years of witnesses who'd watched and stayed silent. After a week, a kind widow named Mama Chidinma approached her at the market. "You can sleep in my storage shed. It's small, but it's dry. I can't give you food, I barely have enough for myself, but you can have shelter." "Thank you, Ma." Zuri's eyes filled with tears. "I'll repay you somehow. Just survive, Noirem. Just survive." Zuri found work anywhere she could. She carried water for elderly women, 1 cup of gari as payment. She swept compounds for busy mothers, a handful of beans as reward. She washed clothes for traders, whatever food they could spare. It was barely surviving. Some days she ate nothing at all. But she was free. No Ngozi screaming at her. No Kyoma mocking her. No Adi's cruelty. No Chidi's contempt. At night, lying in the shed on a mat even thinner than before, she talked to her mother's spirit. "Ninem, I'm alone. I'm hungry. I'm scared. But I'm still standing. I won't break. I promise you, I won't break." And slowly, something began to change inside her. She'd spent 12 years as a victim, accepting abuse because she had no choice. But now, with nothing to lose, she found something unexpected. Power. The power to choose. The power to decide who she would become. The power to rise. "They threw me away," she whispered into the darkness. "But I'm not garbage. I'm my mother's daughter. I have her strength, her grace, her unbreakable spirit." She began to notice opportunities instead of just surviving day to day. A trader needed help organizing goods, Zuri's intelligence impressed her, and she got steady work. A family needed someone trustworthy to watch their children. Zuri's gentle nature won their hearts, and they paid her fairly. Word spread, honest, hardworking, dignified despite her circumstances, kind to everyone, even those who'd ignored her suffering. Slowly, painfully, with bleeding hands and empty stomach and determination forged in 12 years of fire, Zuri began to rise. 2 years passed. Zuri was 24 now, and something remarkable had happened. Not through magic or rescue or sudden wealth, but through sheer, grinding, relentless work. She'd saved every kobo from her various jobs. While other young people spent freely, Zuri saved. While others sought comfort, she chose investment. She started small, buying beans in bulk and selling them portioned at the market. The profit was tiny, but it was hers. She expanded, added groundnuts, then palm oil, then stockfish. Each success funded the next step. She worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, but now she worked for herself. The widow's shed became too small. Zuri rented a single room, tiny, barely furnished, but hers. She owned 3 wrappers now, simple but clean. She ate twice a day, simple food but enough. She was thin still, but strong, healthy. People in the village began to notice. "That's Amora's daughter. The one her aunt threw out. Look at her now, running her own business. And did you see how she helped that young orphan boy last week? Gave him food and found him work." Despite what she suffered, she didn't become bitter. That's because she has her mother's spirit. Amora was kind like that too. Men began to approach her with serious intentions. Not like before, when they'd simply noticed her beauty. Now they saw something deeper: character, strength, dignity, the kind of woman you build a life with. Zuri was polite but focused. "I'm not ready," she told them gently. "I'm still building my life. But thank you for your kindness." Meanwhile, across the village in her large compound, Ngozi was watching her own world crumble. Kyoma was 28 now, increasingly desperate. The few men who'd shown interest had faded away. She was known as spoiled, lazy, cruel, beautiful face with ugly spirit. Adi's engagement had collapsed. Her fiancé had witnessed her slapping a servant and walked away in disgust. At 26, she was panicking. Chidi was 24, still living off his parents, failed at every venture, no skills, no drive, no character. Other young men his age were building businesses, starting families. Chidi was playing cards and drinking palm wine. Ngozi's husband had lost respect in the village. Word had spread about how he'd allowed his wife's cruelty to his niece. Men avoided him. Business deals fell through. His reputation was shattered. And every conversation in the market eventually mentioned Zuri. The girl who'd survived. The one who'd risen from nothing. The orphan who'd become someone respectable through sheer character and work. Did you hear? Zuri helped pay for that widow's medical treatment. Yeah. After what she's been through, still so kind. That's what real character looks like. Not like some people who had everything but wasted it on cruelty. Ngozi heard it all. Every word was a knife. Every praise of Zii was a condemnation of her own choices. She'd thrown away gold thinking it was stone. And now everyone could see it. 3 years after throwing Zuri out, Ngozi stood at the market entrance, frozen. There, 20 meters away, stood Zuri. 25 now, wearing a simple but beautiful blue wrapper, her head held high, conducting business at her stall. She wasn't wealthy, her stall was modest, her goods simple, but she radiated something Ngozi's daughters with all their fine clothes could never achieve, dignity. Customers approached Zii with respect. Children ran to her with joy, she always had a kind word, sometimes a small treat. Even elders greeted her warmly, recognizing the strength it took to rise from where she'd been. Ngozi watched her oldest daughter Kyoma, 30 now and desperately unmarried, standing beside her in expensive lace that suddenly looked garish. Adiz, 28, bitter and alone. Chidi, 26, useless and unmotivated. And there stood Zuri, the orphan girl. The one she'd treated like garbage. The one she'd thrown away. Glowing. Not with wealth or status, but with something far more powerful, self-made success and unshakable character. Their eyes met across the market. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Zuri's expression didn't change. No anger, no triumph, no gloating. Just recognition. She saw her aunt. She acknowledged her with a slight nod. And then she turned back to her customer, continuing her business. That dismissal, that calm, dignified dismissal, hit Ngozi harder than any confrontation could have. Zuri didn't need to shout or accuse or demand apology. Her life spoke louder than any words.
Mama, chioma whispered urgently.
We should go. People are staring. They were. The market had noticed the encounter. Everyone knew the history. Everyone was watching to see what would happen. Ngozi turned and walked away, her daughters trailing behind. But she could feel the stares. Could hear the whispers. That's the aunt. The one who threw Zuri out. See how the tables have turned. Karma is real. That night, Ngozi couldn't sleep. She stood in her compound, still large, still comfortable, but feeling suddenly empty. Her daughters' bitter arguments drifted from their rooms. Her husband's disappointed silence filled the air. She thought about Amora's deathbed. Her sister's trusting eyes. The promise she'd made. The promise she'd broken the moment the burial was over. She'd taken an innocent, grieving 10-year-old and systematically crushed her for 12 years. Not because Zii had done anything wrong, but because of jealousy, fear, insecurity. And Zii had survived. Had risen. Had become everything Ngozi had feared she would be, and more. The regret that filled Ngozi's chest wasn't the kind that brings redemption. It was too late for redemption. It was the hollow, haunting regret of seeing clearly, finally, too late, the magnitude of what you've destroyed. She'd had a niece who could have loved her. Who could have been a blessing to the family. Who had her sister's spirit and grace. And she'd thrown her away. Now that niece had become a woman the village respected. Ngozi had become the villain of a story everyone knew. The lesson was learned. But learning comes with a price. Ngozi would pay that price every day for the rest of her life. 3 years later, Zuri stood in her own small home, 2 rooms, simply furnished, but clean and peaceful. She was 28 now. Her business had grown steadily. She wasn't wealthy, but she was secure, respected, and genuinely happy. More importantly, she'd done something that defined who she truly was. She'd started helping orphan children in the village. When she saw a child suffering as she'd suffered, she couldn't walk past. She gave them food, found them work, taught them skills, showed them kindness. "You remind me of someone," one old woman told her at the market. "Your mother." Amora had that same giving spirit. Z smiled. "That's the greatest compliment anyone could give me." Her life was full of purpose. She'd never married, she'd received proposals from good men, but she was content building her life first. Maybe one day. But for now, she was complete. She'd forgiven her aunt, not because Ngozi deserved forgiveness, but because carrying hatred was too heavy. She'd let it go. Moved forward. Chosen peace. But forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. When she occasionally saw her aunt in the village, she was polite but distant. Civil but boundaried. There was no relationship to rebuild. That had died 12 years ago on a kitchen floor where a child slept like a dog. Across the village, Ngozi's life had become the cautionary tale everyone whispered about. Kyoma was 33 now, unmarried, bitter, watching younger women marry while she aged alone. Men saw the cruelty in her eyes and chose kindness in other women instead. Adiz was 31, also unmarried, her beauty faded by bitterness. She'd driven away every decent man with her sharp tongue and sharper spirit. Chidi was 29, still living with his parents, still useless. He'd had opportunities, his father's money could have set him up, but character can't be bought. Without discipline, without work ethic, without basic human decency, he'd squandered everything. Ngozi's husband, once respected, was now pitted. The man who'd said nothing while his wife tortured an orphan child. Silence makes you complicit. The village remembered. Ngozi herself had aged badly. Not from years, from regret. It consumed her like acid. Every time she saw Z walking with her head high, every time she heard the village praise Amora's daughter, every time she looked at her own failed children, the regret grew. She'd tried once to approach Zuri. 2 years ago, desperate and broken, she'd waited outside Zuri's stall. "Zuri," she'd whispered. I wanted to say." Zuri had looked at her with those calm, knowing eyes. "You don't owe me words, auntie. We both know what happened. I've forgiven you because carrying anger hurt me, not you. But we have nothing to rebuild. May you find peace with what you've done." And she'd walked away. No drama. No scene. Just quiet, final closure. That dismissal haunted Ngozi more than any screaming confrontation would have. Because Z was right. There was nothing to rebuild. The relationship had been destroyed 12 years ago, brick by brick, cruelty by cruelty, broken promise by broken promise. Now Ngozi stood at her window, watching Z walk past with a young orphan boy she was mentoring. The boy laughed at something Z said, his face bright with hope, the hope of a child who'd found kindness after knowing only cruelty. Ngozi's eyes filled with tears. That could have been her legacy. She could have honored her sister's trust. She could have raised Z with love and watched her flourish. She could have been part of this beautiful story of resilience and success. Instead, she was the villain. The cautionary tale. The example of what happens when jealousy destroys your humanity. And so the village learned a truth that echoes through generations. How you treat orphans and the powerless reveals your true character. The child you abuse today may become the adult whose success exposes your cruelty tomorrow. You cannot crush a spirit that refuses to break. Jealousy makes you destroy beauty, but beauty always finds a way to bloom, even in the harshest soil. The greatest revenge is not confrontation. It's living well, rising high, and letting your success be the mirror that shows your oppressors what they truly are. Z's aunt threw away gold thinking it was stone. She broke a promise to her dying sister. She tortured an innocent child out of jealousy. And by the time she realized her mistake, the orphan girl she despised had become the woman the entire village respected. The ancestors remember. Life remembers. And karma never forgets those who betray the trust of the dying. Some lessons are taught through words. But the most powerful lessons are taught by watching someone you tried to destroy rise higher than you ever imagined possible. That lesson stays with you forever. And there is no escape from the regret that follows. Years later, when villagers told this story to their children, they always ended it the same way. And remember, Noirem, how you treat others when they have nothing reveals who you truly are. Because one day, that person with nothing may become someone with everything. And you'll be left with nothing but regret. Z never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the 12 years on the kitchen floor. But she also never let it define her. She rose. She succeeded. She helped others rise too. And that, not revenge, not confrontation, not bitterness, was the most powerful lesson of all.